Welcome to Immigration Answers with Seth.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Immigration Answers with Seth. And by Seth, I'm talking about immigration attorney Seth D. Stringer, founder of the Stringer Law Firm in Birmingham, Alabama. Seth helps immigrants in Birmingham, across Alabama and beyond, find safety and stability through VAWA petitions, U visas, family-based immigration, asylum, and naturalization. I'm Sean O'Connor, and today we're talking about emotional, financial, and psychological abuse, forms of harm that often don't leave marks, but still qualify under VAWA. Seth, how are you?
Doing pretty well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I just want right off the dome here, I want to say define VAWA for those listening that might not know the acronym.
Okay, so VAWA stands for Violence Against Women Act. So a lot of times when people hear VAWA, they automatically assume women are the ones who are able to apply for this type of relief. However, it is available to both men and women.
Ah, good. Oh, good to know. Good to know. So we're obviously in the sort of area of abuse, not something we love to talk about, but when someone hears that word abuse, they often think of physical harm. How do you help people understand that emotional, financial, even psychological abuse can qualify under VAWA?
Well, like you said, a lot of times people think of abuse and they think that they need to be physically touched in order to be considered to be an abuse victim. However, victims of abuse can take various forms. For example, it can be financial, it can be psychological, emotional, things like that. So, for example, if you are financially abused, you may be, for lack of a better expression, kept prisoner. Your money may be tied up under someone else's name, so you cannot access it, and therefore you will be subjected to this other person. Emotional abuse is similar, however, it can be included in financial abuse. However, emotional abuse is a broader spectrum. It can be narcissistic abuse. It can be borderline personality abuse. It can be anything associated with manipulation as well.
That relates. I mean, you mentioned sort of financial restrictions is a fairly tangible and a concrete indicator. In terms of other behaviors or patterns, are there strong indicators that someone might be experiencing non-physical abuse that fits within the protections? What should people be looking for?
Well, I think a lot depends on the situation, but I would tell people who may be considering this to see whether they are subject to abuse. Does this feel right? So if it does not feel right, you may want to investigate a little bit further. I would encourage anyone who is interested in learning more about their personal situation to read articles on the internet or videos on YouTube or other platforms like that to see if they meet the qualifications as to what other professionals deem to be victims of abuse.
So investigating that on their own, just to a certain degree, I know many survivors can feel unsure, again because maybe there isn't any obvious visible injuries. Let's talk about evidence or proof, right? What sorts of things is USCIS looking for?
One of the things I tell my clients to do is to get a psychological evaluation. That's going to give a third-party professional opinion as to this particular person's situation, to let USCIS know that it's not only just in this person's head, but another person is also believing that this individual is subject to abuse. In addition to that, I encourage my clients to go to therapy. A lot of times they don't like doing this because they may have a cultural stigma against therapy or getting a psychological evaluation, but in my opinion, it's necessary to prove that objective reality.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The good thing is, it seems, I know it's cultural specific, but in general, it seems therapy is mental health generally is a little more part of the common conversation these days. So that's a good thing. Financial control can seem obvious, I guess, but probably shows up in different ways. What are some common examples you see that may qualify as financial abuse under VAWA?
Well, one example is if you are working, whether you're working legally or illegally, um, where does your money go?
Hmm.
Does your money go into your spouse's account? Does your money go into your personal account? Do you have access to that money? So obviously, if you don't have access to the money that you've earned, then that may be a trigger warning that you are the victim of financial abuse.
You mentioned earlier the mental health, psychological issues. I'm thinking psychological manipulation can be fairly subtle. How do survivors start recognizing it? When they've been conditioned, I assume that whatever behavior is happening is normal. So if you've experienced that, how do you kind of flip that switch as a survivor to identify the manipulation?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. A lot of people don't realize that they are victims of emotional or psychological abuse. But again, if I had to encourage someone to think more about it, I would tell them, does this feel right? Does this feel strange to you? If it does not feel strange to you, if this living situation just puts you on edge, then you may be subject to emotional manipulative abuse. Again, there are resources online to help you evaluate your specific situation to help you unpack and know whether or not you are subjected to manipulation.
I know you can't, for confidentiality reasons, mention anything specific, but can you describe a moment or situation when documenting non-physical abuse made a clear difference in a VAWA case that you were dealing with?
Yes, so I was dealing with a client a few years ago. His wife was abusing him emotionally and to a certain degree physically. The good thing about today's society is that people text everything. Everything, almost everything, is in writing. So if I were to advise someone who is thinking about it but is still in contact with his or her spouse, I would tell them to take screenshots of any and all text messages that you have with this other person. Email is not really used that much between couples now. However, if there are emails between you, then obviously save those emails as well.
Some people, I'm guessing, worry that maybe their experience or situation isn't serious enough. How do you help them understand what USCIS actually looks for when evaluating uh, cases like these?
Well, most people diminish their personal experience. They don't really want to be considered a victim of domestic violence. However, what you need to do is talk to a third person. If
Mhm.
you are too afraid to talk to a friend, then you can come to a professional and talk to him or her about your situation.
Yeah, it's almost uh, a byproduct of the psychological manipulation to begin with, almost.
Correct. Like I said, people
Mhm.
don't want to think of themselves as victims, but if you help, if you can talk to someone who can help you unpack your situation and what is actually normal. A lot of these people, they may have had abusive relationships when they were younger with their parents, so they think that this is in fact normal. However, if they're
Mhm.
talking with a friend about their situation or a coworker with their situation, then they will realize that what they are experiencing is not normal. And if that does not feel normal to them, then they need to evaluate and talk to a professional, a lawyer, to see whether or not that experience is considered abuse for USCIS. So, what USCIS is looking for is extreme abuse, but
Hmm.
that in and of itself is a vague term. What is extreme abuse? Each individual case is decided on its own merits. So, what is extreme for one person may not be extreme for another person. You have to have these steps in place to prove that what you have experienced is extreme. That is why having a psychological evaluation is so important, as well as going to therapy and having your therapy sessions documented.
All right. Well, let's talk misunderstandings or misconceptions that might keep survivors of non-physical abuse from reaching out sooner. How do those misunderstandings potentially affect their immigration timelines?
Well, a lot of people, when they are thinking about a different way to get a green card, in particular, whenever someone is applying for VAWA, they are applying for a green card. That's not so with a U visa, but that's not the subject of this conversation right now. What they need to do is just talk to someone. It can be a friend. If their friend thinks that that may be subject to abuse, especially an American friend who knows the society and the culture here. If that friend thinks that this is not normal, that this could be considered abuse, then that person may need to contact a lawyer to discuss their case further.
Mm-hmm.
So again, a lot of people don't think that having a spouse that is abusing drugs is considered abuse. Well, it may or may not be considered abuse. In my opinion, it is considered abuse because the spouse is subjecting that person to at least psychological abuse, because no telling who can show up at the door at any given moment if this person is in fact using drugs.
Yeah, I wouldn't. That's an interesting aspect of that kind of a situation because uh, almost by not I think of it, it's illegal behavior potentially, and so now if my spouse is doing that, now I'm kind of I don't know, in a predicament that I didn't choose.
Yeah, so especially today, a lot of people are afraid of the police knocking at your door. Not necessarily for anything that you've done illegally, but because you may be out of status. Well, if that's the case, then that is in itself a form of manipulation and control and abuse. A lot of these people, especially if they are on drugs, they want to keep their spouse with them. The one thing that they can do and say to their spouse to keep them with them is, if you do not stay with me, I'm going to call ICE on you. That has happened before. That will happen again in the future. That is abuse. You need to document that, and you need to see an attorney as soon as possible.
Obviously, we could talk for a long time about this, and I know we'll have a chance to talk again. But let's for those folks listening right now, let's go. I don't know, get a little specific or give them something actionable, right? For someone who's unsure whether what they're going through qualifies as abuse, what's a safe way for them to start, getting clarity and protecting their options? I imagine often, they don't want to, they have to kind of keep it on the down low if they're in a situation with another person. What's your recommendation for folks that are listening?
I would say that, again, if it does not feel right, you need to run it by another person, whether that's a friend, a trusted friend, or an attorney like myself. Um, all these types of abuse, they take on various forms. So, for example, the physical abuse, that seems pretty black and white. However, what is physical abuse? Obviously, if someone is hitting their spouse, that is abuse. But what about if they are throwing something at the spouse that does not hit the spouse? That can also be considered physical abuse. The same with emotional abuse. So a lot of times when people are married with each other, one spouse may say that I will harm myself if you leave me. That in and of itself is a form of manipulation and psychological abuse. One of the things that you need to do, again, is just document this. Document this, talk to a friend about this, and again, talk to a professional about this.
Yeah, this is you're talking about documenting things, and as you said, texting is kind of ubiquitous. I'm curious if keeping a journal, as you said, someone, I'll kill myself if you leave me. Would keeping a journal about what's been going on be, I'll say admissible? I don't know if that's the right term.
Oh, absolutely. I would encourage my clients to write everything down. Write it
Mm.
down physically on a piece of paper, but also take a photo of that, because you don't know what's going to happen to that piece of paper in the future. Maybe your spouse is going to find that piece of paper
Yeah.
and destroy that piece of paper. However, if your spouse does destroy that piece of paper with all your evidence, all your details on it, then you at least have a photo of that document, so you can present that to USCIS. And yes, that is admissible to USCIS.
Got it. Well, listen, this has been, a serious topic, but at the same time, super informative. Good to see you. Thanks for everything.
Likewise, thank you.
For those of you listening, thanks for being here. Uh, if you enjoyed Immigration Answers with Seth, be sure to visit the Stringer Law Firm. at stringerimmigration.com. You'll find information there about VAWA, U visas, family integration, asylum, and other ways to protect your future in the United States. Thanks again for listening, and don't forget to like, subscribe to the show, and share this episode with someone you know who might benefit from it. Thanks again. I'm Sean O'Connor. Have a good day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.